Well, I want you to know that I and all my colleagues on this subcommittee appreciate your being here. Your participation in the subcommittee's ongoing investigation into tobacco is essential. This is not going to be, however, an easy day. We have a lot of substantive issues that we want to go into. When we hear about scientific disputes, we have to listen to one expert versus another. But let me tell you, there's some things that we know about from our own personal experience. I was a smoker, and I know how addicted I was to smoking. I know how hard it was to quit. Each and every time I did try to quit. And I had to do it a number of times before I was successful. So from my own personal experience and from people I've known and talked to, your universal comment that cigarette smoking is not addictive just doesn't ring true. Now, Mr. Johnson, I want to start with your testimony. You and your colleagues seem to have almost a fanatical insistence that your product's the same as all these other products. This morning in your written statement and your oral statement, you compared cigarettes to coffee, tea, sweets, sugar, warm milk, cheese, chocolate, and Twinkies. That's quite a list. I'm struck by what I think is a calculated attempt to trivialize the devastating health impacts of your product. You and I both know that Twinkies don't kill a single American a year. They may not add to a healthy diet, but they don't kill. The difference between cigarettes and Twinkies and the other products you mentioned is death. And I'm sure you're aware that the Surgeon General and the American Medical Association estimate that cigarettes kill over 400,000 smokers every year. Putting aside your assertion that people accept this risk willingly, do you agree with this estimate?
Do I agree with the estimate of 435,000 people? I've heard from this committee this morning three or four different numbers. My understanding of how that number is
If you don't agree with the number, then give us your number. How many smokers die each year from smoking cigarettes?
I will explain.
No, I want your answer. We have a limited time.
I do not know how many.
Do you disagree with the Surgeon General's opinion?
It is a computer-generated number that makes
Mr. Johnson, I'm going to have to ask you to respond to my questions. Do you or do you not agree with the Surgeon General's estimate of over 400,000 smokers dying each year?
I do not agree.
Okay. Do you know how many die each year?
I do not know.
How can you, as the chief executive officer of a company manufacturing a product that's been accused of killing so many people, not know this information? How is it?
I'm telling you that number is generated by a computer, and it makes two important assumptions. The first, that virtually everyone who smokes and dies because they smoked, unless they got run over by a bus. And second, that model allows people to die 1, 2, 3, 4 times. I don't know how that can happen, but that's what that model does.
Well, I'm struck by the overwhelming scientific agreement on the dangers of smoking. The U.S. Public Health Service, the Surgeon General, the Food and Drug Administration, the World Health Organization, the National Cancer Institute, the American Medical Association. I guess all of these groups you would call the anti-tobacco industry. But they all say it's hazardous. The experts also agree that smoking causes heart disease. Do you agree that smoking causes heart disease?
It may.
Okay. They agree that smoking causes lung cancer. Do you agree?
It may.
Do you know whether it does?
I do not know.
Why not?
Because all of that is
proprietary?
Statistically generated data. It is epidemiological as opposed to empirical. There have been no laboratory studies which have been able to confirm any statistics.
Our colleague John Bryant said in his opening statement his grandfather, who smoked all of his life, died of lung cancer. Do you think that lung cancer was caused by smoking?
I don't know, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. The medical experts agree that smoking causes emphysema. Do you agree? Emphysema.
It may.
They agree that smoking causes bladder cancer, stroke, and low birth weight. Do you agree?
It may.
Mr. Tisch, I want to move to you for a moment. In a deposition last year, You were asked whether cigarette smoking causes cancer. Your answer was, quote, "I don't believe so." Do you stand by that answer today?
I do, sir.
Do you understand how isolated you are in that belief from the entire scientific community?
I do, sir.
You're the head of a manufacturer of a product that's been accused by the overwhelming scientific community to cause cancer. You don't know? Do you have an interest in finding out?
I do, sir. Yes.
And what have you done to pursue that interest?
Well, we have looked at the data, and the data that we have been able to see has all been statistical data that has not convinced me that smoking causes death.
Mr. Campbell, you were also deposed, and you said, quote, "To my knowledge, it has not been proven that cigarette smoking causes cancer." This is a rather passive and puzzling approach, especially in light of the consensus, not by some, but all of the scientific community. Will you ever be convinced, and what evidence are you waiting for? And let's have the microphone passed over.
Yes, I may be convinced. We don't know what causes cancer in general right now, so I think that we may find out what causes cancer, and we may find out some relationship which has yet to be proven.
Well, you know, I must say, this is rather a passive approach. Don't you feel you have an obligation, the same obligation that every other consumer company has, to determine whether you're causing harm and to take steps to minimize that harm? You're not meeting that responsibility, and it's clear your views on the health impacts of cigarettes are out of step with an overwhelming scientific evidence. If all the medical people who don't work for you say it causes cancer, what more do you need to understand that that's the case and to accept it and then try to work constructively to try to see if we can avoid that terrible tragedy to so many people?
Is there a question, sir?
That's a question.
I'm sorry, it was too long for me to...
Well, I think that the point I'm making is that all of you have some responsibility not simply to say you don't know, even when the overwhelming weight of scientific evidence is against you. I think you have an obligation to know. In my view, at the center of the entire debate over tobacco is nicotine. This ingredient in tobacco has an enormous impact on humans. At our last hearing, Mr. Spears told the subcommittee that nicotine is an important flavor. In contrast, Dr. Kessler said the taste of nicotine is actually bitter and can be replicated through the addition of pepper. Dr. Kessler also told the subcommittee that he was unaware of any purpose for the inclusion of nicotine in a tobacco product except for its addictive effect. Yet Mr. Spears insisted to the subcommittee that nicotine was a flavor. I want to insert in the record at this point a document titled "Tobacco Flavoring for Smoking Products." The document was published by the RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company in 1972. The document lists hundreds of potential flavorings for tobacco and rates them for smoke taste and smoke aroma. But neither nicotine nor nicotine sulfate is listed as an additive. Am I missing something, Mr. Johnson? This was R.J. Reynolds. Why wasn't nicotine listed as a tobacco flavoring? Or do you disagree?
I would want to see the document, but I think I can give you the general answer to that. Nicotine is the natural component of tobacco leaf, and therefore would not be an added ingredient. Nicotine sulfate, as everyone here has testified, is required by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in minuscule quantities.
So
that was a document.
It's not a flavor because it wasn't added?
That was a document, as I recall it, that addresses flavors and aromas.
So you submit then that it's not listed as a flavor in your document, company's document, because it's a natural ingredient in the tobacco?
I would have to look at that document, understand what its purpose and intent is. I'm trying to give you a generalized answer to a publication 22 years old.
Well, we're going to move on, and we'll get back to some of these issues. Mr. Bliley?